All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We're really lucky to have Cassie Edner to join us this afternoon to just give us a training on some of the important changes that are coming to both the SNAP, the Supplemental Assistance Nutrition Assistance Program, and the TANF program in Virginia. These changes are coming about because of a recent federal debt ceiling agreement and the end of some policies that were put in place during the public health emergency to keep people from losing important food and assistance. Before we begin, though, I wanted to just go through a couple of housekeeping notes. You probably noticed at the start of this, we are recording this training today, so those slides and the recording will be shared with people who registered with the training after the webinar. The second is that there is a way as a feature, a Q&A feature for you to ask any questions or submit comments to myself or Cassie during the course of the training. And then the last piece is that this information presented in today's training is just for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice on any subject matter. We do encourage you to reach out to an attorney, and we've got a great legal aid network here in Virginia that can help you out. So before we begin, I just want to just give just a brief introduction to Cassie Edner. She joined the Poverty Law Center not too long ago, but she's been a legal aid attorney in Virginia for just about 10 years now. Has served as a legal aid attorney at both Virginia Legal Aid Society and Legal Services of Northern Virginia before coming to us to now serve as our lead for our public benefits work. And also serve as director of our Virginia Hunger Solutions Project. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Cassie.
Okay, thank you. Now bear with me as I share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yes, I can see.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
So when we're talking about public benefits, there are a lot of acronyms. And I have a list of some of them here. Unfortunately, when we're talking, you will often hear us just name out acronyms. So if I miss one, I apologize, and please let me know. But the acronyms that we will be talking about a lot today will be ABAWD, able-bodied adults without dependents. We will talk about more of this later, about how this relates to SNAP benefits. We also talk about AFDC, aid to families with dependent children, CRC, caseload reduction credit, DSS, Department of Social Services, SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This program is one of the largest nutrition programs available in the United States, and it has really helped individuals be able to put food on their table, especially during the federal health emergency. And then there is Temporary Assistance for Needed Families, also known as TANF. VIEW, Virginia Initiative for Education and Work Program, and WPR, Work Participation Rate. I believe Mara put this information in the chat. Is that correct, Mara?
It's on its way. It'll be there in a second.
It's going to be on its way. So if you can't remember what one of these acronyms are, feel free once it's posted to go back and look. Okay, so just a little bit of the history of work requirements. The first widow's pension, which is now one of the very first things that started off and transformed into TANF today, was in Illinois. It was the first state, but the majority of states also funded a widow's pension. The ADC was created to provide cash assistance to family with children, and it was later renamed the AFDC. There were some work incentives in 1962, work requirements in 1967, and in 1981, some demonstration projects and mandatory works with jobs. Now, one of my most unfavorite years as a public benefits attorney is 1996, because TANF was replaced AFDC. TANF is a block grant, and the states have broad discretion over it. The state does have to meet some work participation rates, though, and we'll discuss that more later when we talk about the changes to the debt ceiling. SNAP restrictions were also created. So individuals that were adults, able-bodied adults without dependents, those individuals can only get SNAP benefits for 3 months out of every 3 years, unless they work 20 hours per week or meet an exemption. And we'll talk about that more in detail. So 1996 is kind of when the big changes happened to a lot of the public benefits programs. And the block grant really hurt TANF or AFDC and decreased the effectiveness of TANF because it's based on a certain amount of money that states get, and it's not an entitlement anymore like Medicaid or SNAP, where the funding is always there and always increasing. In 2020, our world kind of turned upside down. That was the start of COVID. The federal and state government acted swiftly to prevent economic disaster. Many changes were put into place for SNAP and TANF and other programs. COVID was awful. However, there were really good programs put into place for Medicaid unwinding. People couldn't lose their Medicaid benefits. There was the emergency allotment, so individuals on SNAP were able to obtain the highest benefit amount for their household size, and there was the child tax credit, and all of these programs put together really reduce hunger in the United States, especially childhood hunger, and lifted a lot of individuals out of poverty. The child tax credit went away a while back ago, but in January or in 2023, we start seeing the emergency allotments and these other requirements or these other protections put back in place. January 2023, the TANF work requirements reverted back. May 11th, the COVID public health emergency ends. June 3rd, the Fiscal Responsibility Act became law, and that increased the age of the work requirement and added additional exemptions to SNAP, as well as readjusting the CRC for TANF. And we will discuss this more later. And then July 1st, the SNAP time limits are reinstated. And October 1st, we're going to see additional increases to the individuals that apply to that the SNAP time limits. Now, unfortunately, we have had work requirements for a while in SNAP and TANF, and there has been studies that found that the work requirements usually don't work. With TANF, you saw an increase in employment, but that faded within time. And if you look at 5 years, employment was the same or higher for individuals not on the work requirement that were not, or that were not subject. So individuals that had that limit on the work requirement, they were employment was either higher or the same as individuals that didn't have to participate in the work requirements. Despite increased earnings, individuals are more likely to remain in poverty. This is often referred to as the benefit cliff. So you end up earning more money, but you lose your TANF, you could lose your SNAP, you could lose your Medicaid, and you're less likely to get out of poverty. Whereas the programs that have supports for individuals to improve their education and build their skills and have voluntary employment, those programs significantly increase earnings, because those programs are keeping people on the program until they're able to earn what they need to and be able to provide for themselves and their families. The work requirement before the pandemic. So again, we talked about the able-bodied adults without dependents. All individuals who are able to work must work or actively engage in a work activity to receive SNAP benefits unless exempt. Individuals who do not work may receive SNAP benefits only for 3 months during a 36-month period. So again, individuals who are on SNAP need to meet one of these work activities, or they have to meet an exemption, or they can't get SNAP for more than 3 months during a 36-month period. So the work activities include work for cash wages or for in-kind goods or services. So what that means is you either work for cash, or say you are helping someone in their home in exchange for rent. That could also be counted towards your work requirements. Participate in or comply with requirements of an employment service program operated by Virginia Department of Social Services. Participate in complying with non-departmental Virginia Department of Social Services work programs, and serve in an unpaid volunteer capacity for a public or private agency, or any combination of these agencies or these activities. Normally you need to have at least 20 hours of work a week, but some of them, the ones with the 2 asterisks, you would have to take your benefit amount and divide it by the minimum wage to determine how much you had to participate in those programs. And then the one with 3 asterisks, you can either do the 20 hours a week or the benefit allotment amount divided by the minimum wage. So these were the work exemptions prior to the pandemic. So if anyone was under the age of 18 years of old or 50 or older, they did not have to meet this time limit. Any person who is medically certified as mentally or physically unfit to work does not also have to meet the time limit. Now, you can, receive Social Security disability benefits, but you could also get a statement from a doctor if you can't work more than 20 hours a week, but you're not quite able to get Social Security disability or SSI. So that's another option. Any adult member of a SNAP household in which a child under the age of 18 is present, a pregnant woman, any residents of an exempt locality based on unemployment rate or labor surplus, and any person who is otherwise exempt from work registration. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. But you can see here that there were, prior to March 2020, there were quite a few localities that were exempt from the work time limit. I won't name them all, but there's a significant amount. And if you're curious, you can find this in the SNAP manual. And I'm sure we'll also be sending out the slides. So that will also be on here if you want to go back and look to see if your county or what counties were not a part of that time limit. So an individual, unless exempt, must register to work and cannot quit or reduce hours to less than 30 hours a week. There are exemptions for this. If you're younger than 16 or 60 or older, you don't need to register to work. Individuals 16 and 17 and not the head of the household. Individuals participating in TANF or refugee cash assistance. And I apologize, I said TANF, I mean VIEW. So if you participate in the work requirements of TANF, you're also exempt for the work registration in SNAP. Parents and caretakers of a child under 6. So you can see the exceptions for this for age is a lot lower than it is for the exemption for the time limit. Again, for the time limit, anyone that has a child under the age of 18 in their household, where this one is a parent or caretaker of a child under the age of 6. An attendant of an incapacitated person, an applicant for or participant of unemployment benefits in VA. This is not applicable to people on strike. I heard a really interesting story as to why the strike policy is in there. I won't get into that today, but it was really interesting. Participants of a drug or alcohol treatment or rehabilitation don't have to register. Persons employed for cash wages or self-employment working to equal to 30 hours of work a week. Persons earning the equivalent of 30 hours a week on minimum wage. Persons physically or mentally incapacitated or have other barriers that make them unfit for work, such as chronic homelessness. Students enrolled at least half-time in an institution of higher education. In this slide, I do not talk about the requirements for higher education, but there are also strict requirements for students in order to get SNAP benefits. So just know that, but I don't go into it at this presentation. And then other persons enrolled at least half-time in any recognized school or training program, including summer school. So I'm going to take you back on this last slide. And again, any person who is otherwise exempt from work registration is exempt from the time limit. And I'd like to highlight here persons earning the equivalent of 30 hours a week on minimum wage. So minimum wage, federal minimum wage is about $217.50 a week. Virginia minimum wage is a lot higher than federal minimum wage. So those individuals will need to work 18.2 hours or more. And then we often see jobs now that are $15 an hour, and those individuals would need to work 14.5 hours. So if you can show that you're working the equivalent of 30 hours a week, making minimum wage, you can get an exemption for that time limit. Individuals who quit or reduce their work hours to less than 30 hours a week will be sanctioned and cannot receive SNAP benefits for a period of time unless they quit for good cause. A list of good cause can be found in the SNAP manual at volume 5, part 8, page 8. And the sanctions for quitting or reducing your hours, the first sanction is a month, the second sanction is 3 months, and the third sanction is 6 months. So the individuals on here that don't have an asterisk, again, they're not part of the requirement that they can't reduce or quit their job. The individuals that are part of TANF or refugee cash assistance or are exempt from the work registration because of their earnings, they are not able to reduce their hours or quit without having that sanction. So, sorry, I have a typo there. Since March 2020, the whole state has been exempt from the time limit. The time limit, according to federal guidance, will be back in place around July 1st of 2023. Individuals eligible for SNAP benefits must be participating in work or meet an exemption. Again, if they do not work the 20 hours plus a week, they will only be eligible for SNAP benefits for 3 months or meet that exemption within the 36 months. So for the past over 3 years, there has been no work requirements for SNAP, but that is starting up again because of the end of the federal health emergency. The last time that I was told about exempt localities, there was a lot less exempt localities than there were before the pandemic. Now, these are subject to change, but it's my understanding that Brunswick, Buchanan, Danville, Dinwiddie, Franklin City, Greensville, Hopewell, Nottoway, Petersburg, Portsmouth, Prince George, and Sussex may be exempt and have been approved for the SNF waiver to be exempt for the time period. Now, with the debt ceiling, there has been an increase or changes to the time limit. They also changed the statutory purpose to add employment focus. The statutory purpose is important because it says what a program can do. So for instance, Medicaid, when you started hearing about those states that had work requirements for Medicaid, many of the cases, they tossed out the work requirements because the purpose was to provide health care to individuals. So sometimes the statutory purpose does allow or does focus the program. Now, we also see an increase in the age for the time limit to 54. So these will happen periodically. So in September, the individuals should be increased, the age for that time limit increased to 50 because it's supposed to be enacted within 90 days from the date of when the act became a law. October 1st, you're going to see individuals age up to 52, or you're going to see individuals that have to meet the time limit up to age 52. And then October of 2024, it goes up to 54. And there is a time limit. This remains in effect until October 1st of 2030. There are additional exemptions. Homeless individuals are now exempt or will be exempt. Veterans will be exempt. And individuals 24 or younger who are in foster care at the age of 18 or older would be exempt. States also have limited use to carry over exemptions to the next year. It would limit the number of exemptions a state can receive to 8%, and that was from 12%. So the state can have a certain number of good cause exemptions for the time limits that aren't necessarily laid out in the federal regulations. And they can have, right now, Virginia has over 400,000 that they can use to exempt individuals per month for the work time limits. So it's something that the state may want to look into, whether it should be using those time limits before this goes into effect. So there's no official guidance out yet. So a lot of us have questions. Who's considered homeless? There's not any guidance out yet. However, we do have the homeless definition in the regulations. So it's most likely or probably going to be the same definition as is in the regulations. And that SNAP defines homeless as a household that lacks a fixed and regular nighttime residence, or a household whose primary nighttime residence is a supervised shelter designed to provide temporary accommodations, a halfway house, or similar institutions that provide temporary residence for individuals who otherwise would be in an institution, temporary accommodations for the resident of another, not more than 90 days. So if an individual is staying with another person for more than 90 days, they are no longer considered to be homeless. A place not designed for or ordinarily used as a regular sleeping accommodation for a human being. So, you know, a park bench or I don't know, that inside of a mall or things like that. Another question is, who is considered a veteran? So there are also questions about whether there's going to be any type of discharge that matters for veterans, and whether that discharge is being appealed. So there are some benefits that veterans can only get if their discharge was honorable. And there's even more benefits that veterans are able to get if their discharge was less than dishonorable. So if it was honorable under honorable conditions or general, those individuals can get certain benefits. And then a lot of benefits are prohibited to people that are dishonorable. So it's kind of unclear what the requirement is going to be for SNAP. Again, there's no official guidance out that we have seen yet. And then again, you can always appeal an honorable discharge, dishonorable discharge. I don't know when, but there are attorneys that do that. So the impact, SNAP estimates, the Center for Budget Policy and Priorities estimates that 19,000 SNAP participants are at risk of losing their benefits. However, the CBO estimates that there would be a net gain in individuals eligible for SNAP due to increased exemptions. So it's great that more people may be eligible based off of the exemptions. It's concerning that, individuals may lose their SNAP benefits also. But there's also concerns in how these will be applied. So there could be an increase in verifications. What type of verifications are going to be required to verify these exemptions? When there's an increase in verifications, there could be an increase in denials due to verifications, increased terminations due to incorrect assessments, and increased work for the DSS. So remember, we have been 3 years without any type of work requirements. The DSS is currently dealing with Medicaid unwinding. They have to do over, I believe, 2 million renewals before the 12 months is up. So they didn't have to do any renewals either before during the pandemic. So you're getting new policies that require verifications and aren't just like an age limit. Along with the Medicaid unwinding, they're short staff. Some of them have short staff shortages. There are some staff turnover. There are different fundings for different counties. And there's increased pressure for QC, quality control. So all of this puts even more on our local DSSs that are already have enough that they have to do with everything else that's going on. Now, the work requirements before the pandemic for TANF. TANF is, I feel, either not as straightforward or a program that there is not a lot of participation in. Again, the block grants really harmed the TANF program, priorly known as AFDC. Recipients must participate in VIEW unless otherwise exempt. They must seek employment opportunities, participate in assignments made by case manager, and accept job offers. Now, there are exempt individuals, individuals that are 17 and under, individuals that are 18 to 19 enrolled in elementary or secondary school, unable to participate because of a temporary medical condition prevents them to work at least 20 hours a week. Recipients of SSI or SSDI, I changed the name of this, it's in the manual, incapacitated, but they do say that it's for recipients of disability or SSI, because incapacitated is a very legal term, so it's clearer when you say SSI or SSDI. Individuals that are 60 plus, individuals who needed to be substantially on a continuous basis to care for a family member in the household, or a parent or a caretaker relative of a child under 12 months who provides care for that child. Now, this is not going into depth on the work requirements. This is just a brief overview for TANF because there are a lot of moving pieces for TANF. I would like to point out that unlike SNAP, a pregnant individual cannot get an exemption unless there is complications with their pregnancy. Again, the exemption for a child under 12 months is a lot harsher than SNAP, which is 18. So it's a little bit more stringent than SNAP. Also, in addition to the participation in VIEW, there are also time limits. So there's a 24-month time limit, and the 24-month time limit is followed by a 12 months where they can't get TANF, followed by 24 months where they could, and then 12 months where they can't, and then 12 months where they can. And we'll talk about why it's 12 months at the end and not another 24 months when we talk about the federal requirements. So there are exemptions to the 24-month requirement for individuals that participate in VIEW. Again, the individuals that have the exemption on the previous slide wouldn't have the 24 month time limits. But there are good causes to participate for more than 20 months. Areas of high unemployment, individuals enrolled in employment related to post-secondary education, training, unless self-initiated. So if TANF put them in the training, they can continue to get it for more than 24 months, unable to find an employment or lost a job. And these are time limited to how long you can receive them. The 60-month federal requirement is an individual can only receive TANF for 60 months. Again, there's a lot of exceptions, but there are some exceptions, but the individuals that don't have to participate in VIEW, many of them still have to meet the 60-month requirement. So you can get an exception if you're a caretaker, is taking care of someone that's physically or mentally disabled and not able to support themselves, or if the caretaker or the person in TANF, that's the caretaker is needed. They are totally physically or mentally disabled and are not able to self-support. Those people can also get an exemption. During the pandemic, there was a removal of the time limits and removal of the VIEW requirements. So again, this started back to the pre-pandemic way in January of 2023. Now, the debt ceiling did make some changes to TANF. And as we discussed, TANF is a block grant that is very state dependent. So the changes to TANF aren't as straightforward as the changes to SNAP. It took me a while to wrap my head around these requirements, and I think I'm still wrapping my head around them sometimes. So recalibration of caseload reduction. Caseload reduction credit is calculated based on the comparison of the current number of families with the number of individuals that were on it in 2005. So that's what it was before the debt ceiling changes. That has changed to 2015. They were talking about changing it to 2020. That would have been awful, but 2015 isn't as bad as 2020. And what this means is that 50% of single parents families and 90% of two-parent families must be engaged in work-related activities. This percentage is lower for states that have a decrease in participation from 2015. So they compare the caseload from 2015 to today, or whenever they will be doing the reassessments of these. And if it's lower, the state can reduce the number of families that work. So the failure to meet the requirement can decrease the state TANF grant. So if the state failed to meet the 50%, there would be a penalty and the state would get a decrease in their whole TANF amount. And that TANF amount pays for things other than just TANF. There is a host of other programs that the state pays for out of the TANF grant. This is effective on October of 2025, and it cannot include any reductions to policy change. So if we had a decrease in the caseload because we made the policy changes harsher, those would have to be netted out. It also prevents anyone from who receives less than $35 in state funding from being included in the benchmark year for the caseload reduction. So the question is, does this have any effect on Virginia? And we have to remember that when people are comparing 2015 to 2022, those were the years that Virginia had put in place the exemptions for the time limits and the work requirements to deal with the COVID emergency. So if you're looking at 2022, it might look concerning, but if you look at today's numbers, or if you look about back in 2019, it doesn't look like this would really affect Virginia at the moment. Now, this could cause it to be difficult to put into place policy changes that would help reduce these requirements, but it shouldn't affect now. And we hope that, the states, Virginia and other states, don't become concerned about this when they don't need to be concerned and do harsher penalties for individuals. Again, 2022 is going to be a lot different than 2023. There's also new data reporting requirements. It requires the state to report on the share of recipients' earnings within the 2 quarters after leaving TANF. And individuals that have earnings in the 2nd quarter, states will need to report on employment on 4 quarters after the exit. They also need to report if any individual under the age of 24 were subject to the work requirements and were in high school while receiving TANF, whether they received a high school degree or equivalent prior to leaving TANF. And I think every time I do these presentations, I'm like, oh, I see all the mistakes I made. So I apologize. It's supposed to be degree and not DRE. And this is effective October 1st, 2024. So there are some good things that come out of this. It's always great to see how the program actually affects employment and earnings. So if we can see that individuals are, earning more, that can actually, lift them out of poverty, then, we are knowing that the program is doing what it should. Now, if we see what we expect to see based on some of the data in other studies, that individuals are not able to pull themselves out of poverty after, leaving the TANF program because of not meeting the work requirements or other reasons other than earning out, we could then look and determine whether there needs to be changes to the TANF program and the work requirements that would allow individuals to actually succeed when leaving the program. And there's also a new work outcome pilot that's for 5 states, and that begins October 1st, 2024. Now, there are resources for individuals that may need help. We have the legal aid community. I have the number on here. We have the SNAP calculator. So that's more for individuals who want to check their benefits amount. We have the BPLC SNAP eligibility checklist. I highly recommend it for any individuals that want to make sure that they're getting the right deductions. So that way they know that they're getting the right SNAP benefits. And it goes through all the deductions and what you can deduct on there. We also have the changes to SNAP benefits in 2023, a blog post. And when you go into that blog post, there are PDFs that you can click, and it will show you all of the exemptions for both the able-bodied adults without dependents and the changes to the college students. If individuals need access to food, there's food banks, and I have that linked here. There's summer meal sites for children under the age of 19. Those don't have income requirements. You just take your child to one of these summer meal sites and they can eat free. Other resources, you have the Affordable Connectivity Program and Energy Assistance, and I have links there. Right now, colon assistance is available to individuals. So you might see whether you meet the requirements for the cooling assistance. So you can get help with cooling assistance, like air conditioning, electricity, things like that. Okay, what you can do. So people are always asking me, what can I do to prepare? Knowing the law and what the policy says can be beneficial, and it is beneficial to many people, and we have seen it be beneficial to many people. However, advocacy are going to be able to hopefully make changes in the future. So there's the upcoming Farm Bill. SNAP is a federal entitlement problem. The Farm Bill occurs every 5 years, and this is generally when new policy changes to SNAP occur. You're probably going to see more bills that would try to increase the time limit, but there's also a bill that's trying to eliminate the time limits. There's a bill that would allow college students to access SNAP benefits, increase SNAP benefits, and increase the shelter cap, and also allow lawfully residing immigrants to obtain public benefits. So those bills are some of the current bills that we're going to be seeing in the Farm Bill. In addition to the Farm Bill, another thing that would be very helpful is the child tax credit. Again, I stated that the child tax credit helped lift many individuals out of poverty, and it made food insecurity at a record at very low rates. So this generally helped everyone. The American Family Acts would increase the child tax credit to $3,600 for children under 6 and $3,000 for children 6 to 17. Monthly payments make credits fully refundable, and indexes credits to inflation. And I think that's one of the most frustrating things some of the public benefits individuals see is when it's not always adjusted for inflation. And now this is the time for questions.
Thank you so much, Cassie. We did get quite a few questions here. Let's just see here. I think one of them that came in a little bit earlier was, I think, just a kind of review on the timeline. They had some questions about, I think, particularly on the SNAP work requirements. And the question was, I think, was on a listing of the requirements you were talking about that were pre-COVID, pre-PHE, and whether what it will look like in a few months. I think just kind of review on the timeline of when those work requirements will go back into effect.
Okay. Sorry, let me pull that back up. Sorry, bear with me. Yeah, so July 1st, we'll be seeing how the pre-COVID rules apply. Now, the rules that change due to the debt ceiling, that the first change will be 90 days after the enactment. So the enactment was like June 2nd. Then October 1st, 2023, we will see individuals that are 52 that are added to the time limit. And then in 2024, October 1st, 2024, the individuals that are 53 and 54 will be added to that time limit. And that will remain in effect until October 1st, 2030. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, thank you, Cassie. And let me see here. Yeah, either Aaliyah or Karen, if you have more questions, feel free to put them in the chat if we didn't answer it completely. Another one that came in was from Brianna asking just about, I guess it's this new exemption for people who are unhoused, and whether that include people who are listing a temporary address, and would they need to specify that it is temporary to the caseworkers?
So the guidance isn't out yet, but because of the definition of homeless, and it requires, it can require you living in someone else's home for a short period of time. That could be, that's 90 days. Those individuals would need to probably let their workers know whether they're homeless or not to get that exemption. And again, there are currently exemptions for individuals that have chronic homelessness. So meet those exemptions that are the requirements for homeless that we discussed about previously for more than 6 months. So those individuals can also be exempt now.
Thanks, Cassie. And there was actually a follow-up that Brianna asked about whether a hotel would be count as one of those temporary spaces.
Yeah, I believe it would. If it's not a long-term, a long-term need. We see some individuals that, and I could look further in this, but we see some individuals that reside for years in a hotel. And I don't know if those individuals would be eligible at considered homeless.
Thanks, Cassie. Let's see here. Yeah, question from Dan again. I guess going on that same these new exemptions, and is it in foster care or aged out of foster care? Can you just
Aged out.
Aged out. Okay, thank you. And then a question from Rhonda says, I have families where the children may receive SNAP, but parents may not be legally residing. Will parents be asked to meet work requirements?
The parents reside in a household with children. No. Sorry, I see one that defines lawfully residing immigrant. That's a tough one. An individual that can be here lawfully. I'm using lawfully to describe that, so I guess that's not quite doing the definition correctly. But we see in Medicaid individuals in the marketplace who can obtain Medicaid benefits if they're under the age of 19 or pregnant that are lawfully present. And in the marketplace, they can receive health care if they're lawfully present. And that's different than qualified immigrants. Qualified immigrants, you have to be a qualified immigrant to get SNAP, or in individuals that aren't 19 or pregnant, they also have to be a qualified immigrant to get Medicaid. So a lawfully present immigrant would be a permanent resident that has been here less than 5 years or more than 5 years, and those individuals wouldn't be able to get SNAP. So the Lift the Bar Act would make those individuals eligible for SNAP benefits. We also see children that have an asylee application pending, and they had that pending for more than 180 days. Those individuals are lawfully present, but cannot get SNAP benefits. And Deepak, do you want me to put you on the spot to see if you can add any more description to that?
No, I think you're right. I think it is important. There are a lot, especially in Virginia, we are a very diverse state when it comes to immigrants, and there are a lot of different types of immigrants, particularly a lot of refugees and asylees from countries, and so there's a lot. I think it's important to kind of really consult with kind of experts in those fields to understand what the status is of certain individuals, because even they may not fully understand what their status is. And even if they might be saying they may appear to be undocumented or have a status, but oftentimes they do have some status that is actually legal. And if they're not eligible for SNAP and TANF benefits, they may be eligible for other benefits. There are some other refugee cash assistance programs and other programs that they might be eligible for. So it is important to kind of consult with experts when you're dealing with kind of the more complicated immigrant situations. Let's see here. Yeah, a lot of questions here. So let's go on here and I guess there's a question here, and we may not have an answer on call, but just asking from Leslie, asking whether, for families who are struggling to keep up the work requirement hours, but need that cash assistance, like, are there programs or workshops available or strategies that that you've helped families with in your kind of maybe legal aid work directly?
Not that I've helped families with. We've helped families to see if they need an exemption that they weren't properly assessed for. But the VIEW program, hopefully there's someone there that they can talk to at the VIEW program that can help them out.
Thank you. Let's see here. Yeah, from Sherry Pollard, a question came in about what if someone, an adult, is pending disability? Would they need to still show some kind of verification from a doctor, or could they show proof of an application to get exempt? Can you elaborate on the verification that is required?
Yeah, so usually it's verification from a doctor. If prior to Medicaid expansion, this was always frustrating because individuals may not be able to afford to see a doctor. And, there are still, maybe some issues with individuals being able to afford it, but it's now more readily available. And I asked the state before I did this, is there a form that they should fill out? And they said, no, there's not a particular form for SNAP for them to fill out. That being said, I know when I worked with the legal aids in the counties that I worked with, some of them do have forms. So you might want to ask the Department of Social Services if they have a specific form that they want. And the one that was used in my county just says, can they work more or less equal to 20 hours a week? And then the doctor would sign it and explain the reason, why. And it was a really super simple form if you actually can go see a doctor and afford that.
Thank you, Cassie. Let's see here. Yeah, they said there's a question asking about for refugee and parole applicants, what is the time limit for that for them?
Are you talking about refugee cash assistance or?
Yeah, the
TANF
question is
or-
for, I think it's refugee and parolee. I think applicants in terms of for the immigration benefits, whether they're, I think one, the eligibility for SNAP and TANF, and then the time limit that they need to follow.
Yeah, so refugees would be eligible for SNAP and TANF. So they would have the same requirements under that program. Now, if a person's receiving refugee cash assistance, I apologize, I don't know the requirements for that. But they would still have to, if they were receiving TANF and not the refugee cash assistance, they would still have to follow the requirements for TANF. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. Just going through the questions here. A lot of questions here. Let's see here. Yeah, just I guess a clarification again on the July 1st, that just to making sure we understand that these work requirements and time limits will begin to take effect on July 1st. So will everyone that is not exempted from the work requirements need to start working with their caseworkers to satisfy these requirements?
Yeah. So according to FNS guidance, the work requirements will start on July 1st. Again, there are the exemptions that individuals can have in the 3-month period. And the requirement is that everyone will need to start with a clean slate of the time limit. And I say that in hesitation, but what I mean is there's 2 ways you can do it, and they get you to the same results. You have 0 time limit. That the 3 months, so it starts anew. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, I think, yeah, if you want more clarification, please feel free to put that in the questions.
And individuals should have received a letter stating that if they are what the exemptions are, and they're supposed to return that letter if they meet one of those exemptions. And then, of course, yeah, working with your caseworker if you don't meet an exemption, or even if you do meet an exemption and trying to get those exemptions applied to your case.
Yeah, I guess going back to the medical exemptions, when needing a mental health or medical exemption, is there a certain doctor that needs to give that exemption?
I can follow up on that. I know that I forget if it's SNAP or TANF that states, who can sign it. So I will follow up on that question.
Thanks, Cassie. And we still have about 4 more minutes until 3 o'clock to finish the webinar, but we still have a few more questions. We'll try to get through them quickly as we can here. One of the questions, I guess this goes back to even the SNAP calculator. It actually goes as one of my clients received SNAP Medicaid benefits. I had a question, was how much money is too much to qualify for benefits? Is this case by case, or is it a set rate?
That's a difficult question. Let's talk about Medicaid. Deepak's probably like, please, Cassie, don't talk about Medicaid. So Medicaid is very complicated, and there's many different ways that you can be eligible for Medicaid. I will say that Enroll Virginia is a great resource for individuals who can get information on their Medicaid income limits. And we can send that out if you don't already have that. Now for SNAP, there is a 200% of the federal poverty level that individuals have to meet unless they're 60 or older or disabled. And then they also have to meet the net income limit. And like Deepak said, the SNAP calculator is a great way to find out that information. You can put their income in there. And that guide that I have, the checklist, talks about all of the deductions. You can read through that and put their information there, and it can give an estimate of what they would be eligible for. Of course, if they add something that can't be deducted, it's not going to give a correct estimate, but it could just give a good place to get an estimate on how much they're eligible for.
Thank you, Cassie. And another one, just got, I guess, not a clarification on the 30 hours minimum wage slide. Is this the most that you could make before getting cut off, or is this how much you have to make unless being exempted to qualify?
It's how much you will need to make in order to meet that exemption. We also have a SNAP helpline, and the individual is letting y'all know and telling me to tell everyone that if you have any questions, you can also call that SNAP helpline. We can't do direct representation, but we can, give advice or maybe point an individual in the right direction.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe Mara, are you able to put the phone number in the chat if you're able to?
Yes, I'll add that right now.
Yeah, and I think most of them answered. I guess one more clarification on the, if for a family, the parents are undocumented, but they have US born children who are eligible for SNAP, and the work requirement for that family, just to kind of clarify that again.
Yeah, so because there's children in the household under age 18, they're exempt from the work requirement. And then I also see that I put employment and education instead of
Oh yeah, you had it right. I think it's just a question maybe on the history, like when did it change from employment to education on that view, the view program?
I don't know. I was concerned that I got it wrong because I saw all the typos that I had in that PowerPoint, but I apologize. I'm not certain when that was changed.
Yeah, I think that's the nature of the General Assembly, right? Sometimes they change the name, and it's just to change it sometimes. Let's see if any other questions come in here. But yeah, we're right at 3 o'clock. I just want to thank Cassie for a wonderful presentation today. And just a reminder, we did record today's presentation and we do have the slides, and we'll be sharing that with everyone who registered for today's webinar. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Cassie.